What if the biggest barrier to change in your organization isn't strategy, but culture? Hi, I'm Gia Lacqua, leadership strategist, trauma informed empowerment coach, and former Fortune 100 VP. Today, I want to discuss how empowered women leaders are transforming corporate culture, not by fitting into outdated systems, but by refusing to settle for them. After 20 years in corporate America, I know how powerful women's leadership can be when we stop performing and start leading with truth, with clarity and alignment. And I'm here to tell you this: culture isn't static, it's not written in stone. It evolves with leadership over time, and it's dynamic by design. Let's talk about it. Empowered women leaders don't buy into "that's just how it's done." They name what others won't, and they challenge entrenched norms. Saying the hard thing creates spaces for innovation and progress. Now, I was not always the one to speak up, but I learned fast in my career that silence doesn't solve problems. And guess what? I'm a problem solver. So I learned really fast that saying the hard thing was important even when it was unpopular. It actually became a really big part of my leadership style at my core. And of course, at first, it felt risky, it felt scary. But eventually, what ended up happening is that I had C suite executives and vice presidents seeking me out to consult with me in private because they wanted my candid perspective, whether it be on another leader or a big initiative they were rolling out, because others told them what they wanted to hear. I told them what they needed to hear. Now, traditional leadership emphasizes hierarchy and dominance and, of course, output. Empowered women bring relational, intuitive, and systemic strength, making organizations more resilient and future ready. One woman came to me for coaching because her workplace relationships were strained. Now, she wasn't sponsored by her company. She paid for coaching out of her own pocket because she knew that something had to change. And on paper, she was extremely accomplished. But underneath, she was holding back. And she admitted that she was afraid to speak her truth in meetings. She was worried about being seen as difficult or facing consequences for challenging others. So, through our work together, we anchored her confidence in her values, and she rewired her identity from "I'm someone who avoids conflict" to "I am a leader who creates impact by speaking clearly and honestly." Not only did her relationships at work begin to transform, but her company recognized her for exactly what she once feared: her voice. She was given the organization's Speak Up Award for modeling courage and integrity in leadership. Now, connection and collaboration, of course, drive loyalty and engagement. And relational intelligence breaks down silos and increases transparency. So let's talk about integrating analytics with intuition, because this is a very underrated area. Balancing data with instinct makes leaders agile and forward looking. Many years ago, I was interviewing a candidate who came in with limited experience, but had an energy and a drive that reminded me of myself very early on. Now, the quote unquote safe choice would be to go with a candidate who had more skills and more experience. But instead, I trusted my instinct and hired the one who didn't necessarily check all the boxes. And she grew into one of the strongest members of my team. Now, let's talk about redefining success. And boundary setting can be a bit of a dirty word for women especially, but let's talk about it. So hustle culture isn't leadership. And empowered women leaders model boundaries as strength, not weakness. There was a time in my corporate career when I thought hustle was the price of leadership. I thought this is just how it is. I wore the long hours, the constant availability, the late night emails like a badge of honor. And on the outside, I looked like the woman who had it all together. And for a while, I did. But on the inside, my body was screaming at me. I had heart palpitations. I was chronically exhausted. I was on the constant edge of anxiety. And it all came crashing into perspective the day my daughter was admitted to the pediatric ICU. Because in that moment, none of it mattered. Not the titles, not the bonuses, not the accolades. What mattered was being present. And I realized that I had been giving that away in the name of success. That experience reshaped everything I thought I knew about leadership. Boundaries weren't barriers, they were filters, they were lifelines. They weren't about saying no to opportunity, but it was about saying yes to what actually mattered. Now I teach female leaders that hustle culture isn't leadership, burnout isn't a badge, and boundaries are not weakness. They are the clearest signal of strength because when you protect your energy, you protect your impact. Now, psychological safety is essential for innovation and honest dialogue. It leads to stronger collaboration, creativity, and cohesion. Empowered women expand success metrics beyond output. They measure inclusion, impact, and resilience, not just the short term wins. They reshape corporate values. Now, nearly every single female leader that I work with is driven by impact. But here's the thing, impact isn't just about hitting revenue targets or driving the bottom line. In my coaching, I help leaders to define impact more broadly, how they shape company culture, how their leadership affects the people around them, and how they leave a personal imprint on others. Because true impact isn't only measured in profits, but in the legacy of trust, resilience, and the change that you create. So here's what I want you to remember. Corporate cultures don't change because of a fancy new slogan on the wall or another round of leadership training. They change when leaders, especially empowered women, refuse to shrink themselves into outdated molds and instead lead with truth, clarity, and alignment. And when women bring their full selves to the table, they model a new definition of power that's rooted in trust, in resilience, and authentic influence. And that doesn't just transform boardrooms, it transforms entire organizations. So the next time you wonder if your voice matters or if pushing against the status quo is worth it, remember this. Empowered women don't just adapt to culture, they rewire it. You can enact change just by showing up and being yourself. So if you are ready to step into that kind of leadership and build cultures that thrive long after the meeting ends, stick with me and subscribe to this channel. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.